The sound of rain hitting the window had become familiar to Rachel. She was used to quiet evenings alone, her small house filled with nothing but the ticking of a wall clock and the hum of distant thunder. Life had slowed down since her divorce years. Go. At 45, she had learned to find peace in solitude books, tea, soft music. She thought she had already seen the best and worst life had to offer. But that evening, everything shifted with a single knock on the door. When she opened it, the sight before her made her heart pause. Ethan stood there, soaked from the rain, his hair dripping, his backpack half open. Her nephew, the little boy she once taught to ride a bike, was now a grown man. His shoulders were broader, his voice deeper, his eyes filled with something she recognized instantly: pain. "Ethan," she asked, surprised but warm, "what on earth are you doing out in this weather?" He gave a tired smile. "Hey, Aunt Rachel, I didn't really have anywhere else to go." Rachel didn't hesitate. "Come in, you'll catch a cold." She pulled him inside, shut the door against the storm, and rushed to grab a towel. Ethan's clothes were soaked, his sneakers leaving small puddles on the wooden floor. He laughed awkwardly as she fussed over him, handing him the towel. "Sorry," he said, rubbing his hair dry. "It's just been a rough few days." Rachel guided him to the fireplace and started a small fire. The warm glow filled the room, softening the edges of the storm outside. "Talk to me," she said gently. "What happened?" Ethan hesitated, staring into the flames. "My girlfriend and I broke up. We had an argument, I said things I shouldn't have, and, well, she asked me to leave. Then my job situation got messy too. I just needed a break from everything." Rachel felt her chest tighten. She had seen that kind of quiet sadness before, the look of someone trying to stay strong while falling apart inside. She knew it too well. "You did the right thing coming here," she said softly. "You can stay as long as you need." Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers with gratitude. "Thanks, Aunt Rachel. I didn't want to bother me," she said with a small laugh. "This house has been too quiet for too long. I could use the company." For a while they sat in silence, just listening to the rain and the crackle of the fire. It felt peaceful to souls, both hurt in different ways, finding comfort in simple presence. Rachel made hot chocolate, just like she used to when Ethan was a kid visiting during holidays. "You still take 2 marshmallows?" she asked playfully. He smiled faintly. "You remember that?" "Of course," she said. "I remember everything about you. You used to sneak extra ones when you thought I wasn't looking." They both laughed, the sound warm and easy. For a brief moment, the years between them disappeared. It wasn't aunt and nephew. It was just two people reconnecting after too long apart. As the night stretched on, the conversation deepened. They talked about old memories, favorite movies, missed birthdays, and the small regrets that life always leaves behind. Rachel spoke about her divorce, how she learned to live alone without bitterness. Ethan listened with quiet attention. "You always seemed strong," he said. Rachel shook her head. "I just learned how to look like it. Everyone has weekdays." Ethan leaned back, thoughtful. "You know, I don't think anyone's ever said that to me. People always tell me to man up, but no one really talks about the days when you just can't." Rachel smiled sadly. "Then maybe you came to the right place. This house accepts bad days." He looked at her then, a little differently, like he was seeing her not just as family, but as someone who understood him in a way few people ever had. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The fire burned low, the storm outside quieted, and the clock struck midnight. When Rachel finally stood, stretching, she felt something unfamiliar and ache. Not of sadness, but of something quietly stirring inside her. "It's late," she said softly. "I'll make the guest room ready for you." Ethan stood too, his voice gentle. "Thanks, Aunt Rachel. Really, I don't know what I'd have done if you hadn't opened the door." She gave a warm smile, though her chest felt heavy. "You'd have figured it out. You always do." As she walked down the hall to prepare his room, she caught herself glancing back. He was standing near the fireplace, looking around the living room like he was remembering something from his childhood. There was something different about the way he stood, calm, grounded, older. For the first time, she saw not the little boy she once helped with homework, but a man quietly rebuilding himself. After setting out fresh sheets and blankets, she said good night. "Sleep well, Ethan." He smiled softly. "You too." Rachel closed her bedroom door and leaned against it for a moment, her mind unexpectedly restless. Why did his presence make her heart feel so full and yet so uneasy? Maybe it was just the comfort of having someone in the house against someone to talk to share laughter with. It had been years since she had that. Lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of rain. For years, she had told herself she didn't need anyone, that loneliness was just another kind of peace. But tonight, for the first time, she felt how empty the quiet had truly been. She remembered the look in Ethan's eyes. Tired? Yes, but kind, sincere. The way he spoke with care. The way he listened without rushing to fill the silence. He had grown into the kind of person she admired deeply. It made her proud, but it also unsettled her heart in ways she couldn't name. Somewhere down the hall, she heard the floor creak softly as Ethan settled in. That small sound brought a smile to her face. The house didn't feel so empty anymore. As sleep began to pull her under, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is what change feels like." She didn't know it yet, but that rainy night would mark the start of something neither of them had expected, something that would test their hearts, their understanding of love, and their courage to face emotions that blurred every familiar line. Rachel didn't plan for it. Ethan didn't either. But life often begins again in the quietest moments, like the knock on a door in the middle of a storm. And as the rain continued to fall softly outside, Rachel's house, once silent and still, felt alive again, lit by the warmth of two lonely souls, unknowingly stepping into a story that would change them both forever. The days after Ethan's arrival passed quickly, and Rachel soon realized how much his presence had brightened her quiet world. The house no longer felt empty. There was laughter again, the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings, the sound of footsteps on the porch, a calm warmth that made her forget how lonely she had been for years. Ethan had always been polite, but now he was different, more confident, more thoughtful. He fixed the creaky cabinet door that had bothered her for months, repaired a leaky faucet, and even repainted the porch without her asking. He worked quietly, sometimes with his headphones on, humming softly to songs she didn't recognize. Watching him made Rachel feel something peaceful and proud, like life had given her a second chance to care again in return. She cooked for him the way she used to for her late husband. Homemade meals, warm soup on rainy days, and her favorite lemon pie that Ethan had loved as a kid. She didn't say it out loud, but it felt good to have someone appreciate her effort again. He always smiled when she served dinner. "You're spoiling me," he'd joke, and she'd laugh, pretending not to blush. One evening, a heavy storm rolled in. The power went out just after sunset, and the entire house went dark. Rachel lit a few candles, and their glow spread through the room like soft gold. It was quiet, except for the sound of rain on the roof. Ethan sat on the couch, holding a flashlight, while Rachel made tea on the gas stove. "You know," he said, his voice low and thoughtful, "this place feels like home." Rachel looked up, surprised. "Home, it's just an old house." He smiled, shaking his head. "No, I mean the feeling. Safe, warm, like time slows down here." Her heart skipped. No one had said something that kind to her in years. "That's sweet of you," she said quietly, trying not to show how much it touched her. He leaned back, his face lit softly by candlelight. "You always made things feel okay when I was a kid. I remember when Mom got sick, and you came to stay with us. You were the calm one. You made everything better." Rachel felt her chest tighten. "I just did what family should do," she said. Still, Ethan replied, "It meant something to me." The air between them grew heavier, not uncomfortable but full. It was the kind of silence that carried meaning, the kind that didn't need words. Rachel felt the warmth of the candlelight and the closeness of the moment sink deep into her heart. She hadn't realized how much she missed this being seen, being appreciated, being part of someone's world after tea. They sat near the window, watching the rain fall in silver streaks. Rachel wrapped herself in a blanket and looked outside, thinking how strange life could be. Ethan was family, yes, but he was also a kind soul who understood her loneliness in ways few people ever had. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly. She nodded. "Just thinking. Rain always makes me remember things. Good memories." He asked. "Some are," she said. "Some remind me what I've lost. But tonight it doesn't feel sad. Just quiet." Ethan smiled faintly. "Quiet can be good. I've missed quiet." That night, Rachel found herself thinking about him more than she meant to. His kindness, his calmness, wasn't just comfort. It stirred something deeper, something she hadn't let herself feel in years. But she quickly pushed the thought away. He was family, and this was simply gratitude and care. Still, her heart didn't listen to reason as easily as her mind did. The next morning, the storm had cleared. The house smelled like wet grass and sunshine. Ethan was outside fixing the mailbox, wearing an old gray hoodie. Rachel watched him from the kitchen window, smiling to herself. He worked with quiet focus, stopping now and then to look at the sky. There was something peaceful about him, something grounding. When he came in, she handed him breakfast. "You didn't have to fix that," she said. He shrugged with a grin. "Couldn't let your letters keep falling on the ground?" She laughed softly. "You sound like your uncle used to." He looked at her curiously. "Do you miss him?" Rachel paused. "I did for a long time. But sometimes people grow apart before they realize it's over. I guess we just stopped being part of each other's story." Ethan nodded. "I get that. That's kind of how I felt about my ex. We stopped seeing each other even when we were in the same room." Their eyes met across the table. For a brief second, it felt like they understood each other completely to people. Who knew what it meant to lose connection and find peace again in unexpected places? Later that evening, Ethan brought out an old photo album he found in the closet. "You kept all these?" he asked, flipping through pictures from years ago. There was one of him as a kid, sitting on Rachel's shoulders at a fair, both laughing under a bright summer sky. "Of course," she said. "You were like my little shadow back then." He smiled at the memory. "You were my favorite person growing up. Still are, actually." Rachel froze for a second, her heart skipping. His tone was gentle, honest, and without any hidden meaning, but it still warmed her deeply. "That's a big compliment," she said with a small smile. "It's true," he replied simply. As the evening went on, their laughter filled the room again. They played an old board game, joked about silly things, and talked until it was late. When Ethan finally stood to head to bed, he paused and said softly, "Good night, Aunt Rachel. Thanks for everything." Rachel smiled, but her heart ached a little. "Good night, Ethan. Sleep well." When he left the room, the quiet returned, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet she used to live with. It was softer, filled with memories of laughter, warmth, and a sense of belonging. Later, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself, "Don't overthink it, Rachel. He just feels like home because he's family." But she couldn't ignore how alive she felt again. How each day with him had reminded her of the woman she used to be before life became routine and lonely. She hadn't planned it, didn't want to misread anything, but the emotions had already begun to grow in quiet corners of her heart. She realized something that night. Sometimes connection doesn't ask for permission. It just happens, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. As she drifted to sleep, she remembered the way he looked at her that evening. The warmth in his voice when he called her his favorite person. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't wrong, it was just real. And in a world where most feelings fade too quickly, real was rare. The next morning she woke to the sound of him whistling in the kitchen, making coffee. The smell filled the air, rich and comforting. For the first time in a long time, Rachel smiled before even opening her eyes. Something inside her whispered that life was about to change again. And she wasn't afraid anymore. The next few days passed quietly. But something had changed between Rachel and Ethan. It wasn't something they talked about. Yet both felt it like a quiet current running beneath everything they did. Their conversations became softer, longer. Their glances lasted just a second too long. The easy laughter remained, but now it carried a strange, unspoken warmth neither dared to name. One morning, Rachel woke early to find Ethan already in the kitchen. The sunlight fell across his face as he brewed coffee, humming softly. For a moment, she simply watched him, realizing how naturally he had become part of her life. His presence filled the spaces that once echoed with silence. She smiled, but deep inside, her heart began to ache. Feelings she didn't understand or didn't want to were slowly surfacing. Ethan turned, noticing her. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "Morning," she replied, forcing her voice to stay calm. They ate breakfast together, talking about his job search and the new opportunities he was considering. But halfway through the conversation, Rachel found her attention drifting not to his words, but to how kind his eyes looked when he spoke, how thoughtful he'd become. She caught herself and quickly looked down at her plate. Later that afternoon, Ethan offered to drive her to the grocery store. On the way back, as soft music played in the car, the air felt different, gentle, but charged. She glanced at him as he drove, focused, the sunlight brushing his face. Something in her chest stirred again, something she hadn't felt in years. The simple, human longing to be seen, to be valued, to be close to someone. When they reached home, Rachel went quiet. She busied herself putting groceries away, but her mind was spinning. She knew she needed to get hold of herself. Whatever she was feeling, it wasn't right to think of it that way. He was her nephew. He was family. She was just lonely, she told herself. That was all, but that evening proved how impossible it was to ignore. It started simply. They were watching an old movie on the couch, one they used to watch when Ethan was a kid. Halfway through, the power flickered again, dimming the room. The movie stopped, leaving only the soft glow of the lamp beside them. Rachel laughed. "Seems like this house can't go a week without the lights going out." Ethan smiled. "Guess it likes the quiet." He sat there, close but not touching, listening to the rain that had started again outside. The air felt thick with something unsaid. Rachel shifted slightly, aware of her heartbeat. She wasn't used to feeling nervous in her own home. "Ethan," she said suddenly, breaking the silence, "can I ask you something?" He turned to her. "Of course." She hesitated. "Do you ever feel confused? About where life takes you? About the people who come into it and make you feel things you didn't expect?" Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice soft. "More often than I admit." Rachel looked down at her hands. "Sometimes I think I've forgotten how to let people close again. Then someone shows up and I feel like I'm learning everything all over." Ethan studied her face. "You're not alone in that," he said. "After my breakup, I told myself I'd stop trusting people. But then I came here, and—" He trailed off. Rachel looked up slowly, and he exhaled. "You reminded me what it feels like to be seen again. Not judged, not compared, just seen." His honesty caught her off guard. Her throat tightened, emotion rising fast. "That's kind of what I've been trying to say," she whispered. The silence that followed was heavy, yet peaceful. For a few seconds, all they could hear was the rain. Rachel's heart pounded, and she didn't know whether to feel comforted or frightened by what was happening. Ethan's voice broke the quiet. "Aunt Rachel, I don't want to make things weird. I know this sounds strange, but you mean more to me than I expected. You've always been family, but lately it feels like he stopped himself. I don't know how to explain it." Rachel's breath caught. "You don't have to," she said gently. "I understand." He looked at her, eyes full of emotion. "You do?" "I do," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "Because I feel it too." Neither moved. The words hung between them, real and undeniable. For the first time, everything they had been holding back was in the open. But there was no shame in it. No wrongdoings, just raw human connection born from loneliness and care. Rachel took a deep breath. "We don't have to define it," she said softly. "Maybe this isn't about love or rules or what's right or wrong. Maybe it's about two people finding peace in each other's company." Ethan nodded, his expression gentle. "Maybe you've helped me heal, Aunt Rachel." I just don't want to lose that." She smiled faintly, tears forming in her eyes. "You won't, but we have to keep it pure. This, whatever it is, it's special because it's honest, not because it breaks any line." He nodded again, relief washing over him. "I understand." For a long moment they sat in silence, both staring at the flickering light of the candle beside them. There was sadness, yes, but also acceptance and mutual understanding that what they shared wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to learn from. Ethan stood and walked to the window. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think love only came once or twice in a lifetime. But maybe love just means caring enough to see someone's soul, even when you're not supposed to." Rachel smiled through her tears. "That's a beautiful thought." He turned back, his voice sincere. "You taught me that." That night, after he went to bed, Rachel sat alone for a long time. The rain outside had stopped, but her mind was still storming. She thought about everything that had happened, the late-night talks, the quiet dinners, the unspoken feelings that had somehow found a home between them. She didn't regret it, not a moment of it, because what she felt wasn't wrong. It was real, human, tender. It wasn't desire. It was connection. Ethan had walked into her life at the perfect moment when she had forgotten how to feel, and reminded her that hearts could still wake up, even after years of silence. As she blew out the candle and prepared for bed, Rachel whispered to herself, "Some truths aren't meant to be acted on, just understood." In the stillness of the night, she found peace in that thought. What she and Ethan shared wasn't something to hide, it was something to cherish quietly. Like a gentle reminder that even the loneliest hearts can find light in the most unexpected places. By morning, nothing seemed different, yet everything had changed. When Rachel greeted Ethan at breakfast, there was a calm understanding in their eyes. No tension, no confusion, just quiet respect. They had crossed no line, but they had shared a truth that would stay with them forever. Rachel didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was clear. Love, in its purest form, had already done its work. It had softened her heart and given Ethan hope again. And sometimes that was enough. The morning after their quiet confession, the air in Rachel's house felt different, lighter, calmer, yet full of something deep and unspoken. Ethan made breakfast as usual, humming softly, and Rachel joined him with a faint smile. There was no awkwardness, no hesitation. It was as if they had silently agreed to let peace lead them forward. For the next few days, life moved in a gentle rhythm. Ethan continued his job search, sending applications and taking interviews online. Rachel kept busy with her art classes and garden. But she found herself watching him more often, his focus, his kindness, his patience. Their bond had settled into something steady and mature. It wasn't romance, not really. It was care. A quiet, healing connection that both understood but didn't have to name. Then, one bright morning, everything shifted again. Ethan received a phone call while Rachel was watering the plants outside. When she returned, she saw him sitting on the couch, his expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Nothing's wrong. Actually, it's good news. I got the job." Rachel's eyes widened. "Ethan, that's wonderful. Where?" "In Seattle," he said softly. "It's a great position, design team lead. But I'll have to move next week." For a moment, Rachel stood still, her watering can still in hand. The joy she felt for him was real, but beneath it was a quiet ache that reached deep into her heart. She forced a smile. "Seattle's beautiful. You'll love it there." He nodded, though his voice lowered. "I guess I will." That evening, Rachel cooked his favorite dinner, grilled salmon and mashed potatoes. They talked about his new job, the city, the apartment he'd have to find. She smiled, asked questions, gave advice, doing her best to sound happy. But when Ethan excused himself to take a call, she stepped outside. Standing under the fading sunlight, her heart felt heavy. She had spent years learning to live without attachments, without needing anyone. And just when she had begun to feel alive again, he had to leave. Still, she knew this was how life worked. People came into your world not always to stay, but to help you remember who you were before the silence set in. That night, she barely slept. She could hear Ethan packing in the next room, quietly folding his clothes, organizing his things. The sound made her chest tighten. She wanted to tell him how proud she was, how grateful she felt for his presence. But the words stuck in her throat the next morning. As the sun painted the kitchen in gold, she poured them both coffee. Ethan walked in, dressed neatly, ready to start preparing for his move. "I can't thank you enough, Aunt Rachel," he said softly. "You helped me get back on my feet." Rachel smiled, though her voice trembled. "I didn't do much. You did it all yourself." He shook his head. "You gave me peace when I didn't even know I needed it. I'll never forget that." They shared a quiet breakfast, both pretending to be strong. Every little thing, the sound of his chair, the sight of his mug, the way he smiled felt like a memory forming in real time. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ethan broke the silence. "I don't really want to go," he admitted. "This place feels more like home than anywhere I've been in years." Rachel's eyes softened. "That's because you brought life back into it," she said. "You reminded me what it means to care again." Ethan looked at her, his expression full of quiet emotion. "You've always cared. Maybe you just forgot how much it matters." She laughed gently. "Maybe I did." They sat there for a long while, watching the sky turn from orange to deep blue. The air was cool, and the silence between them felt comforting. It wasn't the silence of distance anymore, it was one of understanding. As night fell, Ethan said softly, "I'm going to miss this. The quiet talks, the coffee, the porch."